How can I, 69M, reconnect with my son, 48M, despite his sexuality?
I feel that I should preface by saying I'm not the typical type to ask the internet for advice on such a personal issue or any issue. But the unfortunate thing I've come to realize is that I can't discuss this with anyone I know. I'm in my late 60s, and my son is in his late 40s, for relevant my context. His mother and I divorced when he was young, and for all intents and purposes, I essentially raised him as a single father from a certain point onward. I did my best to raise him well, and to be sure he had everything he needed, but I worked a lot of hours and was very career-focused. I realize now I was somewhat absent. I'm also fairly emotionally reserved in general, at least when it comes to physically speaking. I'm better at writing. When he was in high school and in college, he had several girlfriends, and one girl I thought he was very serious about for the majority of his time during his undergraduate education. They broke up. After that, he never brought home any more girls or talked about any. And he moved away to attend medical school, and we stopped talking as much as we had previously. I remember very distinctly one time, while he was visiting on a break from school, I was worried about him, and I had asked if he was on drugs. He just looked physically ill and in a poor state. He assured me it was stress from school, and he would be fine. But I remember this clearly because this visit home was when I first started to think he could be gay. Now the thing is, my son has never told me that he is gay, even to this day, but it has become an unspoken acknowledgement between us. He has a roommate, that's how we mutually refer to him, and he's had the same friend for a long time. Sometimes I will ask about him, but the answers are always short, basically that he's doing well. I think I know maybe 5 things about his friend after some almost 20 years, maybe longer. We speak on the phone occasionally as we live far away, and this is something we never discuss much, if at all.
Recently, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I think I'm a poor father. Somewhere down the line, I taught my son that we can't speak about who he is. I'll admit I'm not the most versed in this kind of lifestyle thing, but I don't want to be shut out from his life. I want to tell him that whatever this is, he's perfectly fine in my book, and I love him. I want to know him and his friend, but I don't know how to tell him or what to say. I'm not sure if I should say boyfriend, as again, he's never said anything to me about being gay. I've just pieced it together over time, so I'm not sure if that's what I should say. Should I just spontaneously bring this up with him? There never seems to be a good time to say what I'm thinking, and the topic seems too serious to send an email or a very long text message. I'm not sure if a written mode of communication would be too informal or make it seem that I don't care. At that, I'm not sure where we should go from there. Update 1.
I wrote about many things, and the letter ended up being much longer than anticipated. I began by discussing some of my experiences with my father growing up and ways I realized I had treated my son similarly. I had wanted to do better than my father, who had moments where he could be cruel, but I failed to realize that being too reserved was also a problem, and I leaned too far in that direction. After his mother left, I was depressed, and I didn't deal with that as well as I should have. I apologized for being absent at work and for being emotionally unavailable at times when he would have needed me the most. I mentioned I'd like to change that in the future, but it's still something that's hard for me to do, and I understand he may need his own space. Then I wrote about how even though I probably don't show it well, I do love him with my entire being. There's nothing he could do or be that can change that, and I'm proud of him for many things. I wrote that by extension, I love whoever he loves, and his chosen family is family to me as well. All said and done, the letter was several pages long.
Then I mailed it, and it was incredibly hard to wait. I decided to text him to let him know I had sent him a letter, as we don't typically write, and it seemed like something that warranted some warning in advance of its arrival, so he wouldn't be entirely caught off guard by it. Eventually, he sent me a text that he would like to call me at the end of the day. We spoke about everything in the letter. I learned that he had believed I viewed him as a burden, which was disheartening to me, as I had always wanted to be a father since I was young, and I never saw him as being a burden, which I told him. We discussed his mother and the plethora of feelings surrounding her. This was a hard topic for me, as I still have many unresolved feelings here, but I realized because of this, I never explained to him everything that happened. I also learned that he was afraid to disappoint me, and that he had put a lot of effort into his career to make me proud of him, as he felt this was the way to impress me, and that it would make up for his defects. I brought up that focusing on work over family and interpersonal relationships was one of my bigger regrets, and he admitted that being so career-driven was straining his personal life. With everything going on at the moment, he also expressed that the medical profession was weighing on him, but he hadn't wanted to disappoint me by not being as emotionally strong as he thought I am. By this point in the conversation, we had both said a lot of very emotional things. He brought up that he felt it was hard to talk to me because I don't make it clear what I'm thinking, and so he felt it was always easier to only discuss work or accomplishments with me and nothing personal. He felt it was easier to let his relationship be an unspoken understanding between us, as he felt I would be uncomfortable to know anything more. At this point, I confirmed that his friend is in fact his partner. He said he felt a lot of shame about it. I told him I regretted not reaching out to him sooner, that I'm sorry that my lack of availability had created this distance between us, and that I am always proud of him, and not just for his career. We ended the conversation by discussing seeing each other in person, as it has been almost 10 years since we've actually seen each other.
I expressed that I would like to fly out to visit him and his partner if he would feel comfortable. We are all fully COVID vaccinated. I now have a plane ticket for early next month, a date which is quickly approaching. I am glad for all of the encouragement I received from this website. I have nothing but gratitude for all of your kind words. Once again, I am asking for a little advice. I have never met his partner in person, nor have I ever spoken to him. He has been with my son for 2 decades at this point, and likely knows him better than I do. I would like to make a good impression with him. However, I don't know any gay couples, aside from them, and as was thankfully pointed out in my previous post here, I am not aware of all the proper ways to describe things as I incorrectly used the term lifestyle. I would like to be invited into their lives, so I wish to avoid offending either of them. Are there any suggestions of common things I should avoid saying to them? Perhaps I'm just nervous because this is coming up soon and I haven't seen my son in so long. Typing some of this out was helpful in and of itself. Relevant comments. I'm hesitant to admit that I don't entirely understand the problem behind asking who is the man and who is the woman.
I've known for a while that this is an offensive thing to ask. I'm just not entirely sure as to why. Is it purely because the question insinuates one of them is not a man? I feel as though that's not necessarily the intention of the question, nor what it attempts to get at, but I wouldn't know how else to rephrase it. I assume it's an area I shouldn't ask questions about. I suppose I'm confused in general, how the day-to-day works when there's 2 men together, though I'm used to being on the receiving end of perhaps a little bit of similar confusion. I raised my son on my own, and that certainly brought its share of concern from busybodies over how I could raise a child alone as a man, as surely our home must have been a mess with no one to clean or do laundry, and he must have starved with no one to cook a meal. And of course I should have remarried quickly so he would have a woman's influence. There was rarely any consideration that I knew how to do these things, so I can understand how asking about these roles in a same-sex relationship might be troublesome for similar reasons, if I'm on the correct train of thought. Additionally, you used the term queer, and I was very much under the impression that this word was a slur. I am assuming this is something only those who are part of the GLBT should be using. Update 2. Due to the contents of that letter and an ensuing phone call, my son invited me to fly out to see him and meet his partner of over 20 years. This was a terribly worrying time for me, as I felt the ice was thin and I feared saying or doing the wrong thing would ruin what little connection we had forged. I went to visit them in early June, and I am incredibly overjoyed to say that everything went very well. While there, I had several emotionally tough conversations with my son, but I tried to listen from a place of wanting to understand and accepting that I have not always been the best father. While at times I felt incredibly hurt by what he had to say, it was mostly because I felt defensive and upset with myself that I had caused him to feel this way. I wasn't always sure how to respond, but it seemed that verbalizing that I felt this way, and that I would need time to give him a proper and reasoned response to some of his comments, rather than a defensive one, was the right thing to do. I would then reflect on my own and give him the response he deserved from me. While there, I also had a discussion with his partner, and I am glad that this man has been in my son's life. He is a truly good man, and he did say that he was cautious of me because of the past, but that he hoped we could all move forward from it. I also learned on this trip that they are foster parents and have also adopted 2 beautiful children. I did not meet them on this first trip. My son was worried that having kept this information from me would cause me to become upset, and I was sad to have put myself in a situation where I wasn't involved.
but ultimately, I can only feel tremendously happy. Soon after that trip, I flew out to visit them again after we had all recovered from the first trip, and soon after that, I flew out a third time. I am relieved to say that after those first trips, it is almost as though there was never any time we were apart, and we have been talking every day. I have felt so much joy over being accepted back by my son, and for being accepted by his partner, and I am now working on selling my home and moving across the country to be nearer to them and my young grandchildren. This is a move they have welcomed and even suggested to me first.
I had planned to write about my first trip, but it was quite an exhausting time for me. While it was absolutely necessary, it was also draining. After a time, I forgot. But I have realized that had I never posted anything here, had I just kept up the way things were, I would never have had my son or his partner in my life, as I do now, and I would never have known the children they have welcomed into their home. I only hope that moving forward I can live out my retirement, watching my new, wonderful grandchildren grow into the bright people they will become. Nothing gives me more joy, and in part, I have this place to thank for it.